Hey you guys, my name is Cyan and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, it's that time of month again where we're gonna sit and talk about all the books that I read for the month of October. I'm gonna try to keep this as short and sweet as possible. So that's what we're doing. Let's go ahead and get into it. The first two books I actually ended up reading on the last day of September, but I just never talked about them anywhere. So let's talk about those first. The first one is actually You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogel. This is a book about two people who are engaged. They are soon to be married, but as it turns out, they are having some marital, or I guess premarital issues, and they kind of want to break it off with one another. However, they don't want to be the one to actually break it off, whether that's for the financial reasons of the wedding or because they just don't want to look like the bad guy breaking the other person's heart right before their wedding's supposed to take place. So instead, they end up kind of pulling these pranks on one another in order to try and get the other person to break it off. With that being said, it kind of sounds like that, plus the way that the cover looks, that this would be a sweet, wholesome, kind of funny love story. And from other people's explanations, that's what I thought while going into this book as well, but actually it was so different from what I thought it was going to be. The pranks are more like teetering on the edge of psychological warfare, in my opinion, and the connection between the two and their romance is actually kind of deep and more emotional than I was imagining that it would be. But still, I really enjoyed this book. However, at the very end, it felt like things did get a little bit rushed and it wasn't really fully fleshed out. Because of that, it is a 4-star read from me. I still really enjoyed the story, and honestly, I don't say this much, but I do feel like it could have been a little bit longer so that we really got to see the characters actually fall back in love with each other. Next up, I have The Crimson Crown. The premise of this book is basically a retelling of the evil queen from Snow White, but make it sapphic. So she is a witch, the witches are persecuted, and as a witch, she goes undercover at the castle, and while she is there, she realizes that a fellow witch slash ex-girlfriend slash enemy is also working undercover at the castle. It was really good and interesting at first, and like I said, the premise is what originally drew me into this book, but when I got 50% of the way through, there wasn't much happening and I just found myself getting really bored and not wanting to continue the story. So unfortunately, it is a DNF. A book this month that definitely was for me though was Kristen Hanna's The Four Winds. In this book, we are following the life of a girl who, when she is pretty young, she ends up getting married, moving to a farm to live with her new husband and his family, but then the Dust Bowl happens and the Great Depression, so her and her children end up moving out of the area looking for a better life, but the struggle does not end there. That's all I'm gonna say, okay? Because this book was just perfection in my opinion. I honestly love Kristen Hanna's writing because she does a great job at showing you relationships between predominantly women, I'll say. She always has two points of views, and it's usually a mom and a daughter or a sister and a sister. I just love the way that she develops those characters and really shows womanhood through their eyes and their relationships. It just shows overall what women's lives were like during different time periods throughout history. This is like a 6-star read for me. Absolutely loved it. Sometimes I love people-driven books, sometimes I absolutely hate them, and for some reason she does it in a way where I love it. Another book that I read this month is actually a dark romance. This is one that I have seen all over TikTok, so I just wanted to pick it up because people have been raving about it, and that is Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. On the book, it says the couple who slays together stays together. I thought it was going to be another fun serial killer romance. It is not. In fact, it is about a guy who he puts on a mask and does thirst traps on TikTok. Yeah, and our main female character is a nurse who is kind of obsessed with his page. She's always leaving, well, thirsty comments underneath his post. And I'm not going to say too much, but just know that eventually he starts stalking her. And then a relationship forms, of course, because it's a romance. But then the plot kind of divots in a completely different direction. It becomes like a mafia romance. It just kind of jumped all over the place, but I get why people love it. It was really fun, especially in the beginning. The beginning of it, I was hooked, but then when we took a left turn, I was kind of like, I don't know. So for me, it is kind of like, I want to say a 3-star. Not bad. It's just kind of like a goofy, dark romance type of book. So yeah, I don't really know if I would recommend it. And then this month, I had a book that I actually really took my time reading, and that surprisingly was The Great Undoing. I just have to say, if you know anything about the Magnolia Parks, Daisy Hates series, it's a whirlwind. Magnolia and BJ, I kind of hate their characters. I do like Daisy and Christian and Julian. If you know, you know that Daisy does not like Magnolia at all in these books, but then Magnolia slowly starts to work her way into Daisy's heart, and I just have to say, in this book, Magnolia worked her way into my heart as well. I still don't like BJ, but that's just that. This book though has to be my favorite out of the series. It really just solidified my love for Jessa Hastings' writing. I think she does a great job at making you feel so many emotions. You get frustrated, you feel like you're in love at some points, and she just really knows how to express those emotions throughout her writing. And this book was so good. I did give it 5 stars. If you don't know, the only thing I'm going to say about it is this entire series takes place in London. People compare it to Gossip Girl, and it is very, very toxic, but we love it. And it is very people driven, so keep that in mind as well. Next, I read The X by Freida McFadden. I like Freida McFadden's writing. Say what you want about her. People compare her to like the Colleen Hoover of the thriller slash mystery genre. Well, I agree with that, and people love to rag on her. Her writing is so entertaining. I can agree that it's not the best writing in the world, but I just like her books so much. This one is no exception. In this book, we are following a girl who she and her boyfriend just went through a breakup. She kind of basically starts stalking him and his new girlfriend, and you're getting the ex's point of view as well as his new girlfriend's point of view, and you can tell that they're both morally gray character. The ex obviously because of her stalking tendencies, and the new girlfriend because she has a secret that we don't know about quite yet until we do know about it, you know? But anyways, this book, while the plot twist was kind of predictable and it didn't get me, it was still so entertaining strictly for the drama of it all. I don't know what it is, but there's something about being in a stalker's mindset. It's just interesting in a way. It's very psychological and I'm down for it. So yeah, this one was really good. I gave it 4 stars. To me, it's probably one of my favorites just because, like I said, the drama. I also read Still King by Devney Perry this month. This whole series is a small town romance that is involving a motorcycle gang that went straight. However, one of the members, his father, is accused of murdering a girl, so he is digging deeper into it, trying to figure out what actually happened. Meanwhile, our female main character is going to be reporting on the murder. She thinks that his father is guilty, and of course, they kind of hate each other because of that. In the end, they end up working together to try to figure out what happened. It is a romance, so we know what's going to happen between these two characters, and honestly, it was a lot of fun. I think that this book focused the perfect amount on the romance as well as the mystery of it all. However, I will say the mystery does not get solved in this book, so it is going to be one of those series where you have to kind of read them in order. But still, I enjoyed my time with it. I think it's like a 3.75. Yeah, I would give it a 3.75. A little bit insta-lovey and very much so like a physical attraction above anything else, but still, I had a good time, and that's all that matters to me. And then for some reason throughout the month, I read 3 Riley Sager books. I don't even know how that happened. It wasn't intentional. The first one that I read by him was Home Before Dark. In this story, we are following a girl when she is very young. Her mom, and her dad move into this house. They believe that it is haunted. They only live there for about 20 days, and then they move out. Her dad ends up writing like a bestseller book about everything that happened to them in that house. She does not remember a single thing happening, so she believes that her father is a fraud. However, he passes away. She now inherits that house, and she goes back to kind of fix it up so that she can sell it. All these weird things start happening, and she realizes that maybe her father wasn't lying at all. And it's good. It's fun. It's got the supernatural spooky vibes that everyone loves. I feel like this one is a little bit more thrilling just because of all these weird, creepy things that keep happening. And then once we got to the plot twist, it was a little bit underwhelming, but it still didn't take away from my overall enjoyment. So this one is a 4 stars. On the opposite hand though, we have Survive the Night, and this one I would say it is a little bit slower throughout, but then once you get to the plot twist, that is what really amped it up. But again, it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the book. In this one, we are following a girl that her best friend is murdered while hitchhiking. So what does she do? She ends up going hitchhiking, and she believes the guy that she hitched a ride with might be the same man that killed her best friend. All these weird things start happening. You're very suspicious of the man that she's driving with, and then at the end, the story just goes in a completely different direction. And again, it was a fun time. I gave this one 4 stars as well. And then we have Middle of the Night. In this book, we are following Ethan when he is a young boy. Him and his best friend are camping in his backyard, and then his friend goes missing. It is now like 30 years later. He ends up moving back into his parents' old home. Now all of a sudden they're trying to figure figure out again what happened to Billy. You're getting all these secrets from this kind of small, close-knit community of people. Can't trust your neighbors, that kind of vibe. It also has like a I know what you did last summer type of vibe to it. This one I found kind of boring. It wasn't my favorite. I just didn't really care for all of the background information that we were getting. So yeah, that's why this one felt a little bit boring to me, but who knows, it might be your thing. It was still not bad, 3 stars. Another thing I did this month, because I haven't been having the best of luck with fantasies recently, is I decided to reread some of my favorites. Well, just 2. And that is the first 2 books in the Zodiac Academy series. If you didn't know, this series is about 2 twin sisters who they learn that they are the heirs to the throne. However, they have to go to Zodiac Academy first in order to learn more about their magic, prove that they can actually be on the throne. And when they're attending this school, there are actually 4 other people who believe they have the right to the throne. So what are they going to do? They're going to bully the girls and try to make them quit school. And it's so much more than that, but like that's the gist of the very first book. And it is such a fun, ridiculously terrible, cheesy kind of book, but I love them, okay? And I think a lot of people agree with me on this because this series is so widely loved. There's a reason for it. It's like a dumpster fire that you cannot look away from. These books are just forever on my mind. So yeah, the first one, 5 stars. The second one wasn't as great for me, but I still really enjoyed it, so it's like a 4. Another fantasy that I read this month was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I literally still to this day can't accurately describe what happens in this book, and I don't know why. It's just when I try to think of what it's about, my brain knows, but the words just can't compute. So I'm gonna put the synopsis on the screen and you can pause to read it if you want. But for this book, I tried to read it during my 24-hour readathon, and I think at the time just sitting down and trying to read this book in one sitting was not doing it. It's definitely, for me personally, a book that you kind of need to break up when you're reading, or else it will get a little bit overwhelming. I like the magic system. I think it's very interesting. I like the world and our characters. In this book though, there wasn't a lot of action because they were spending a lot of time talking about the world and the characters. But after finally finishing it, I did give it 3.75 because the ending just really got me. It was kind of like a grand reveal and I really enjoyed it, and I do end up wanting to read the second one. So I'm glad that I did pick it back up again after that and gave it a second go. And then I also read another book by Devney Perry this month, and that was Garnet Flats. The Edens are like a very known family that founded this town. And this one in particular, we're following Talia, which is an Eden's sister. And when she was in college, she was dating Foster. They broke up for about 8 years. He became a professional fighter, and then he moves back to her town for the sole purpose of winning her back. So obviously it is a second chance romance. I do like second chances. However, I understand that they have a past, and so their feelings might still be very strong for one another, but it still felt like it was very insta-lovey. It felt very lustful, like I didn't see too much of an emotional connection, but that's kind of how all of Devney Perry books that I've read so far have been, so I knew what to expect when going into it. I didn't mind it now that I know that that's the type of book that she typically writes, and I just think they're fun, fast-paced little fluffy romances, and I enjoyed them. So yeah, this one, again, a 3.75. I feel like all of her books have kind of been 3.75 for me because they're not spectacular, but they're also like good and not bad, you know? I also read Ignite Me by Tahira Mafi this month. This is, I believe, the 3rd book in the Shatter Me series. There are some novellas in between. I've been reading all of them. It honestly, I came to the conclusion after reading this book that the Shatter Me series is just not for me. Personally, in this book, I counted and it took up until chapter 14 for them to do something besides talk. And to me, like, that's enough of an explanation in itself. I don't like books when not much is happening, and in this one there was just not much happening at all. Our characters are a little bit insufferable. They're very juvenile, and sometimes that shows, which is perfectly fine obviously because it is YA, but then on the other hand sometimes they act like full-grown adults and are out there saving the world and stuff, and the romance just didn't hit for me like it does for other people. The lines that they used were very, very cringy. 2 boys in this book were just puffing their chest at one another the entire time. The only bright light for this series for me was Kenji. He is such such a funny, lovable character, and I understand why people like the series, but unfortunately it is just not for me. With that being said, I know it's like me dogging on this book the whole time, but it was still a 3-star. It wasn't bad. It's just not my type of read, so that's why I think I'm saying goodbye to the Shatter Me series. Also this month I read The Games Gods Play by Abigail Owen. In this book, every single few years or so, the gods hold trials, and what they do is each god gets to pick a champion, and the champions will compete against one another in all of these trials, and whoever wins that god of the champion, they end up getting to be like the ruler of all the other gods, the one that's mostly in control of everything. So that's what's happening in this book, and we're following our main character. I can't remember her name. Is it Lyra or Lyra? I think it's Lyra. Anyways, she gets picked by Hades. Hades is the god of the underworld. He's like the most hated, I guess, god of all the gods. Of course, the trials are deadly as well, so you're getting to see that. I loved the trials, and I really think that this book was so much fun. However, on the romance side of things, I didn't really feel too much of a connection between our two characters. There just weren't enough instances of them even really interacting with one another. Another thing I didn't particularly love is that I felt like there was something very important that happened with a particular character in this book, but the author didn't build up the reader's relationship enough with that character for me to really care that this awful thing happened to them. So that was a little bit of a downer. I think it just kind of happened way too quickly too, and it didn't really give you the chance to feel emotional. And like when something bad happens to a character that I like, I kind of want to be feeling like I got speared through the chest, you know? And I just didn't feel that in this book, but still, it was a fun time. I gave this one 4 stars, and you know, it's gonna be a series, so I will continue it. Okay, and then I actually have 2 more DNFs. The first one is Rhapsodic by Laura Thalassa. In this book, we are following a girl that she is a siren. She ends up making a deal with the bargainer, and throughout the span of years, she keeps making deals with him, and every time you make a deal with him, you will owe him a favor in return that he can cash out at any time. In order to keep track of how many favors you owe him, you get beads on like a bracelet wrapped around your wrist, and she has like over 200. And so like you're seeing past and present. In the past, you can tell that they kind of really bonded and formed a connection with one another, and then it is the present timeline, and he comes back randomly, so she knows that he's going to be asking her for a favor. She just doesn't know what it is. And I got, again, like 50% of the way through this book, and honestly, I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but I just fully did not care what happened in this book or these characters, and I was bored. So that is why this was a DNF for me. I've been really good about, if I'm not loving a book, just DNFing it, because I don't know, I guess the other day my frontal lobe just like clicked in place, and I realized that life is too short to read books that we don't love, no matter if we spent money on it or what, you know? So that's a DNF. And then another DNF that I had, it was a huge letdown for me because I've heard so many great things about this book. And again, if you love it, I'm so glad that you loved it. I wish I did through and through. But that is Immortal Dark by Tigist Gurma. I swear I'm not trying to like be disrespectful by not knowing how to pronounce things. It's just, I don't know. Anyways, in this book we're following a girl that okay, it's another one where like the world building is a little bit difficult to explain, but from the 50% that I read, basically she comes from a family that their bloodline is one of the few bloodlines that the vampires can actually feed off of. If vampires just go and feed off of anyone, they could possibly die, but there are certain ones that their specific family blood they can feed off of. Her and her sister are like the last 2 from her family line for this certain group of vampires, and they have a house that they can inherit. She goes to this school and she has to like learn and do all of this in order to first inherit that house, so that a very bad vampire who she believes killed her sister or took her sister won't get the house instead. I could be wrong. If I am, feel free to correct me, but like that's what I remember. I DNF'd this, it feels like forever ago, so my explanation could be completely wrong, but for me, I was getting bored, and it also felt very jumpy to the point where I was listening to some of it on audiobook, and whenever you would go from one scene to the next, I would get confused even while listening to it, because it just felt like for some reason I missed something. Like she went from point A to point B without telling us how we got there, and like sometimes authors can do that and it just makes sense, but the way it was done in this book, it just felt confusing. But yeah, again, it was one of those where I honestly felt it was going a little bit too slow at the time, and I just couldn't care less about what happened. So that's why it's another DNF for me. And then I also read this month Foxglove by Adeline Grace. This is the second book in, I don't know what the series is called, but the first book is Belladonna. I love these books so much. The gist of the story in the first book is that our main girl, Signa, she has an encounter with death when she is very young, and so as she becomes an adult, whenever someone dies around her, she can now see death once again. And as it turns out, everyone in her family ends up dying, so she gets passed from family member to go and live with them. And every time someone dies again, she sees death. She moves in with this new family that she really likes. She doesn't want anything bad to happen to them because she doesn't want to have to move once again to live with a different family member. So when she finds out that her cousin Blythe is being poisoned, she's going to try and solve that. That's what happens in that book. It is solved, but at the very end of that book, another murder takes place, and you are introduced to another mythical-esque character. And then this book is just continuing straight after that happens, and it's fun. I enjoy it. I'm not going to say much about this one, except for that I love the new point of views that we got. There was kind of a love triangle going on in here. It was predictable, because at the very end, there's like a grand reveal, and I pretty much knew that was going to happen, so we were just kind of waiting to see how it happened, you know? But still, I enjoyed my time with it. It's so much fun. I love that it's like Bridgerton vibes with the murder mysteries and the like magicalness of it. So yeah, this one was a 4-star though. I did enjoy it, just not as much as the first one. And then finally, if you've hung in there, we are at our final book, and that is One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is about a girl that her husband ends up going on a plane for work. The plane crashes. Everyone assumes that he is dead. It's now been years. She ends up moving on, getting engaged to another man, and her husband comes back and is like, actually, surprise, I'm not dead. I've been trying to make my way to you all this time. So she has the dilemma of what does she do? Does she go back and be with her husband, or does she stay with her current fiance? It's a whirlwind again. It definitely puts you through it emotionally. I love the story so much though. Our character did drive me insane at some points, but it really made you think a lot, and I do like sometimes when books make you think, and it really just like put me in that position, you know? Like when you're reading a book and you think to yourself, what would I do if I was the main character? That's what it did for me a lot throughout this book, and I just liked kind of having an inner moral dilemma with myself on what I would do if I was in her shoes. I hope this is making sense, but either way, it's a beautiful story about love, loss, grief, so many things, and it just really solidified the fact that I need to read more by TJR because I loved it so much. And if you couldn't tell, this was a 5-star read for me. So yeah, those are all of the books that I read in October. Let me know your thoughts and opinions if you guys read any of these books. If you have any recommendations, I'm always open to that as well. But that's it for me. I hope you all have a great reading week and just a great week in general. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye!